Yep. Yeah, I remember that
That's
movie.
a stupid list.
Really? I think aside from Oppenheimer and at least outside of Oppenheimer, I think that's a pretty solid
Op.
list. Oppenheimer.
Hi
Very
there,
fast.
everybody. Welcome to the $127 podcast, the only podcast that doesn't have their intro figured out
Together.
when they start.
That doesn't have pussy in bio. That's a Twitter thing.
What?
Okay.
It's a Twitter bot thing.
All right. My name
Too-
is
too old
Jeff.
for that.
You guys aren't on Twitter, so you wouldn't understand.
I'm Yule.
We have
I
lives.
I don't do that
Shut up.
We're not
with
losers.
that tweeting.
Shut up. I'm
For looking
Dominic.
for-
I'm Anakin.
And today, in case you didn't look at the title,
And
when you
Yoel's
clicked on
drinking
this video,
Sprite.
we are talking about decade-defining films. I saw this Instagram post that was probably taken from Twitter of decade-defining films from the 2020s. We were supposed to talk about Dune 2, but we had technical difficulties, so that never happened. And this was supposed to be
Never
the
forget.
follow-up to that. Because Dune 2, I think, is a decade-defining film. It's definitely something that's going to be changing Hollywood standards, I think, and I hope.
I hope.
For better or for worse.
So we're just gonna dive right in. We're gonna talk about, what we think is a decade-defining film. We're gonna talk about the 2010s, because we might talk about other decade-defining films, and how we think, if we think there's any patterns in terms of the decades in their films, stuff like that. Whatever comes up, we're just gonna talk about it. Okay. So stay tuned, because you're not going to want to miss what we have to say here. Like and subscribe, all that shit down below. And don't forget to comment your favorite or your films that you think defines a decade. Okay? Because I feel like a lot of people have different opinions on what is a decade-defining film. So Yule, what are we starting with here?
I guess we'll start with what makes a decade defining film for us, because for me, I the first thing I googled right now was movies that you should see before you die, movies that have to be experienced if you're gonna really go out of your way to enjoy films. And I feel like if movies are that impactful to where the point to where you have to see them at some point in your life, I think that means that they defined a moment in time. And so
I
to me,
disagree.
fuck you. So to me, that would be a decade-defining movie. But obviously, Anakin disagrees because you looked up box office or what? What was it?
Highest grossing box
Yeah.
office
That's what it
movies
was.
by decade. And then it also goes by year too. So I have all the individual years too for what was highest grossing.
Okay, so we got
But
movies you got to see before you die from Yule. We
Yeah.
got the who made the most money from Anakin. Dominic, what do you think a decade-defining film is?
I mean, I did have a list of the top 10 movies of every decade.
the top by what? What metric? Like
This
top
one's
10 action movies, top 10.
no, this was an IMDb ranked list of top movies.
Oh, so it's
By rating,
I
or
guess
something?
IMDb's rating,
I
overall
don't-
rating.
I don't even think it's by that because that's still community based for the most part. So,
Yeah.
if anything, it's basically the people's choice.
Yeah.
The top 10 of that decade.
Which is that's a valid metric we could also judge by, because people's vote definitely does matter, but it also is not conclusive because fucking Shawshank Redemption's number one, and
That's true.
not everyone has seen that movie. It's
And not
probably
everybody
just
saw
the
it.
most.
Has
Huh?
has anyone here seen that movie?
I've seen it. I own it.
I've seen
you're
half
not the
of
answer.
it.
I'm looking okay, and then Yule's drinking the Sprite, so that's a no. Am I wrong? Tell me I'm
No,
wrong.
you're not wrong. Fuck off.
Okay, exactly. Yeah, so there's a bit of flaw in that one, but
I think it's still fair though.
No,
What was yours?
it definitely is still a metric because it's still fairly objective. There was a poll, people put in their votes. Well, it wasn't a poll. It's an open forum type thing where people can just come in and submit their their votes, and for some reason chose that one a lot. So that
Okay.
is an indicator.
So if I'm keeping score here, we have movies you should see before you die, best grossing, and then most well received.
Oh, hold on.
That
What about
time.
Jeff? What about Jeff?
No, that's our three. But what is
Yeah.
Jeff's?
I think a decade-defining movie is a movie that had the most cultural impact. Just like
That's okay. That's part of mine too. Because mine is like cultural impact because it's so popular. You know,
Well, okay.
So many people went to watch it, and that's all they talked about.
well, let's talk about like cult classics. Like, well, think about Blade Runner or think about John Carpenter's The Thing. Those were flops at the box office, but they have come back and now they are genre-defining films.
But not for the decade though, because for that reason.
Yeah, I would argue that they missed their time.
Yeah, they missed their time slot. Like something else that came out during that time clearly was more popular. You know, in retrospect, now it's more popular, but it's kind of cheating. You know.
'Cause if you want to talk about a cult classic that missed its time, you ready for this?
Shut the fuck up!
No,
Don't you dare say
no, say Speed Racer. Fuck you.
Missed its moment. It's a masterpiece.
No one
Who's
remembers
talking
that
about,
movie.
Who's talking about Speed Racer today?
Me.
No one. Literally,
Oh,
just
nobody.
feel.
Fuck you, man.
People with crash days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, think about this. Like, okay, just off the top of my head, when I was a kid, early 2000s, okay, the decade-defining movies, the top few that come off the top of my head would be like Shrek or Revenge of the Sith or The Dark Knight. You know, those movies kind of like defined growing up. If I just think back to when I was a kid, those are the three movies that I think of. Like, those were the movies that defined that era for me. Just off the top of my head, I'm sure if I looked at a list, there would be more. But it doesn't matter what the score was for those films, or how well they were how well they did at the box office. It's kind of like how they impacted our culture at that time, and how it has impacted our culture since then. That's what a decade-defining film is to me. Like
I think
that.
that's perfect.
Like
Funny
an
thing about
imprint.
that is
huge
all
imprint.
three of those movies are on the top 10 most gross
the
movies
gross
of the
movies
decade.
of the
Yeah.
decade.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
What are the other ones? Can you read that list?
So the movies for the top 2000s top grossing is Avatar, The Dark Knight, Shrek 2, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, Spider-Man, Transformers 3, Star Wars Episode 3, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Spider-Man 2, Passion of the Christ, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Spider-Man 3, Finding Nemo, Shrek the
shit.
Third, Transformers, Iron Man, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Fellowship of the Ring, and Attack of the Clones.
Fuck, that's a really strong list.
Okay,
actually.
yeah, those are decade defining. At
Yeah,
least
like-
franchises,
Yeah.
like, you know, Transformers.
A lot of them are also like sequels or franchises too.
I mean, that doesn't even
would-
matter because, like, if you think about Iron Man when that came out, that was huge because Robert Downey Jr. had been like on a huge hiatus after his whole
Yeah,
drug binge.
it
and things
literally
like that.
created the MCU. So
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. That's really.
But like,
marvelous.
even like if you think about, like, because they're all sequels, that first film is what started that. You know, like, everybody went back
Yeah.
because the first one was so good. It was like, okay, we missed the first one. We saw it on
that's a good
home
point.
video. We're going to go see the second one, because you didn't mention Shrek 1. You mentioned Shrek 2 and Shrek 3. You didn't mention Transformers 1. You mentioned Transformers 2 and 3. You didn't mention, like, all the films that you didn't mention were like the first films of those franchises, pretty much, for the most part.
wait, when did Shrek 1 come out?
I think it was 2000 or 2001.
it's either 1 or 2000.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was 1999, though.
To be fair, the first two Transformers sucked.
Shrek was 2001.
2001, yeah. Yeah, but, like, I mean, we all have memories of those. Well, I don't know about you kids, but me and Dominic,
You,
at least,
first off,
have
I
memories
had
of
the
those films
VHS
coming
of
out.
Shrek. Okay,
I had the VHS of Shrek as
Congrats,
well.
you went to a thrift store. and
I
got
hate
it,
you,
like,
Dominic.
several
We
months
own
ago.
this.
You have it
I
on
was in the
Laserdisc?
trenches.
That's
I
what
was
I
in the
thought.
trenches with VHS.
Shit,
Don't get
Shrek on
started.
Laserdisc? Hell yeah.
Oh.
That'd be
No.
awesome.
Nobody
Oh.
sees Laserdisc. Fuck off, Dominic. But yeah, that's a really good point about the sequels too.
Yeah.
Especially being like it wasn't really accessible because it took forever for movies to come out to like home release in that era.
Before DVDs, yeah.
Yeah, before DVDs. Yeah, you'd always get that coming soon to
V-
video.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Those literally my childhood.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say like box office Anakin, because like at first I was like, oh, I don't know, but that list was, I mean, yeah, I would
Really?
agree that all those were pretty decade defining. With the
That's usually how it
2010s,
goes.
the 2010s list I looked on multiple websites. I got different lists from IMDb, Wired, Reddit, Collider, and a website called Quora that kept coming up. And it was literally just like film bros writing down their favorite movies from that era. Like, okay, so one list I had The Expendables, the first one, on the decade-defining films of the 2010s.
No.
And shit like that. It's just like, you know, I went through multiple lists, probably 10 lists, and only one time did Blade Runner 2049 show up on one of those lists. Or only one time did Lady Bird show up on those lists, or this the Avengers, you know? And I would say that the MCU was the defining,
Yeah.
like, that was the powerhouse of the 2010s. Because,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
like,
Through the beginning and end of it.
yeah,
You had Avengers in 2012, and then you had Endgame in 2019.
yeah, like the entire core of all those films, that is the defining, to me, the defining source of, like, that's the 2010s. All these other movies that were listed, like Her or The Babadook, Wolf of Wall Street, Deadpool, we got Ex Machina here. Looper was on that for some reason. Snowpiercer. Some movie called Upstream Color. Tangerine, The Lobster, The Handmaiden, Annihilation. Like stuff like that. It's like, how is this a decade-defining film? Like, it was just a lot of people that I saw were just making films that they liked that came out through those years. Like, I would love to say, hey man, I really fucking loved the movie 1917, but it's not a decade-defining film. I love that movie, and if someone said, hey, what do you think the best movie from like 2019 is? Here you go, watch fucking 1917, okay? Watch it on the biggest fucking screen possible. Because it's a great fucking film. But that's not a decade-defining movie. And when I was looking at this list, it was hard to pick out films that really felt decade defining. So like I was thinking like, okay, Blade Runner 2049. I feel like
I don't think it is.
maybe.
I really don't think it is.
Obviously you got like Endgame or Avengers, Into the Spider-Verse maybe Hereditary, Whiplash, Lady Bird for sure, because like A24, like that was, I feel like that was a defining film.
They were definitely underground before that movie came out. Like Ex Machina and stuff were like those small spurts that they had.
Yeah.
And people recognized them, but it wasn't big. I think.
Crazy Rich Asians, Parasite, Get Out, The Social Network was on pretty much all of those lists for some reason. I had never seen that film. Frozen and Inception. I feel like Christopher Nolan had a couple of big hits in the 2010s.
He did, and I think Inception definitely deserves that conversation because it did start to step into that movie that was so big that everybody had to experience it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the grain for...
And the wild thing too, like out of all those lists, nobody mentioned a Tarantino film. It was like, you're not going to mention The Hateful Eight. You're not going to mention Django. You're not going to mention I think Inglourious Bastards was in that time frame.
In that time, yeah.
It's like, you're not going to mention those films? Like, that's not even on this list here. And the thing was, like, too, none of the films that won Oscars during the 2010s show up on the lists of the decade-defining movies of the 2010. But in the Best Picture winners, you got films like Birdman, 12 Years a Slave. You got Moonlight, Shape of Water. Those are some great films. Shape of Water is a great fucking film. But, again, like, I don't know if the argument is there for a decade-defining film. Because, like I said, I feel like clear as day the MCU is the decade-defining 2010s. All these other films that are listed, you have arguments for whether or not they do have a cultural impact on society.
Some degree, yeah.
And I feel like I'm going to pass it to you guys to talk about 2010s or whatever. We would talk about the box office of the highest grossing films of the 2010s. But I want to say, like, I feel like a decade defining film is more apparent the longer we are away from that decade. Because we just got out of the 2010s, I feel like it's really hard to tell what films defined that decade. Whereas, like, the 2000s, we're able to tell a good portion of what films define that decade. Or, like, if you look at the 90s or the 80s, like we were talking about Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like those films, decade defining, you know? I'll shut up now. You guys talk.
Oh. No, you're good.
I mean, looking at the box office list for the 2010s, it's pretty much just all MCU stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there's a few, like, you know, outliers here and there. Like, there's, you know, this fucking Star Wars trilogy, but that is definitely not decade defining. Because I don't think so. It was too polarizing. Maybe like decade defining in, like, I guess you could argue a cultural way, because then that kind of turned people off from Star Wars. But
like, I feel like when you get into decade defining, I think that still falls into the case. The movie doesn't have to be good, but it has to have a cultural impact, whether it be negative or positive. Because, like, for me, I love the prequels, and I know that, like Jeff was talking about Episode 3. That was like the first movie I remember being ever hype about and excited to go to the theaters, and then having the experience of we're never gonna get Star Wars again after this, and it was like really sad for me too. So I do know, like, there were people on both sides of the aisle of like, this is how Star Wars dies, this is shit, or this is how Star Wars dies and it ended on a great note and I'm really sad we're not gonna get anything else. And so, like, to me, I feel like as a big fan base, if we're just talking about Star Wars here, like, I think that's a really big cultural shift to be like, this defined a moment in time for people who just enjoy watching films. And I think
I could see that, because like the first and second one, I definitely heard a lot of discourse, but by the time they reached, you know, Rise of Skywalker, I felt like people were just completely done with Star Wars at that point. No one really talked about Rise of Skywalker.
You're talking about
So,
right?
but yeah, I mean, I guess the first one definitely was very hyped, because it was like the first Star Wars movie we were getting in a long while.
Yeah.
Since the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a lot of hype about that. The trailers came out super poppin'. So yeah, I could agree with that. And then, you know, Last Jedi, super polarizing.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of discussion about that just among fans. So I could see Star Wars making an argument for having definitely some pull in the 2010s, but I would still give it overwhelmingly to like the MCU.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
that
without a doubt.
killed it.
I was just gonna say, I think like the only correlation I'm really seeing here is like box office, and then like the correlation between like decade defining and box office is like, these are experiences that you can't miss.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's kind of like what it's coming down to. It doesn't have to be that the movie is good or not. Like, I think I don't know how Avatar was received at the time, but I did see it in theaters.
Super popular. Everyone was watching it.
Oh,
You had to
that's
see
true.
it in 3D.
Well, that
Movie
Yeah,
was
IMAX
sent to-
3D. Like, I remember the showing I
experience.
went to. The only seats that were available to us was the very first row
Oh, wow.
in IMAX, and that whole row was sold out too. So
Jesus.
that just tells you.
I remember seeing Avatar in IMAX 3D, and that was the first time they had. I think it was the first time they had gone away from the red and blue.
Yeah, it was
glasses.
the sunglasses.
It was the
Yeah,
sunglasses
I
thing.
remember
So
that.
it was like, wow, this is crazy. But like even other theater experiences, like I remember seeing the last Harry Potter film in theaters. I think I don't remember when that came out. 2010, I believe.
That's the Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Yeah. When was that? 11?
I think we were in high school.
That was 2011.
11.
Oh, he's got it. Yep.
I remember that theater experience more so than any other Harry Potter film. And then I remember going to the movie theaters to see other things. I don't even remember what they were, and seeing the lines of cougars, milfs, and teen chicks going to see all the Twilight films. You know, they were out the door, around the corner, around the block, and I'm like,
50 Shades
I missed the
No.
era there.
like Twilight,
or Magic Mike.
I would say were decade defining films.
No, we can't. I don't.
I can't
No.
agree with that.
We
You're
can't
lying.
include fucking like crazy fan bases.
I'm gonna
To be
play devil's.
fair,
I'm just
a
saying.
lot of
I'm
movie franchises have crazy fan bases.
I'm
No,
gonna play
okay,
devil's
like
advocate
obviously
here, though.
Star Wars has a crazy fan base, but
I-
there's also people that aren't like Star Wars fans
Like, hey, I'm not a
that
Twilight
would go to
fan.
watch it.
I'm not a Twilight fan. I think they're all right. I've recently watched those.
You're
films
married
all
to
the
one.
way
That doesn't
through,
count, Jeff. You don't
a couple
count.
years ago, but I would say like that was a movie that had a huge cultural impact.
I
Just
I
saying.
hate to agree with him because like if I remember right, Twilight came out before the Hunger Games popped off, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you think about it, like if you think about it from a Hollywood standpoint, there's like, oh, there's money in this, and then we got a slew of YA novel adaptations.
dude,
into
we
the
didn't even
theater.
talk about the Hunger Games. That was
That's a
that
good
was in the
point.
2010s.
Yeah.
That wasn't even on anybody's lists of
That's
decade-defining films.
2012.
Yeah, exactly. That whole franchise popped off there.
Yeah,
And-
and
Because they were looking for their next cash grab after Harry Potter started rapping.
That's true.
Yeah.
but I feel like that
Oh,
still-
Dom's right. It wasn't Twilight. It was Harry Potter.
either okay. Well, then if that's the case, if we're gonna go with who did it first, does that matter in a decade-defining film, or is it who did it best? In that moment?
Twilight didn't do it best.
No,
I'm
I'm
not
just-
saying they did. I think Hunger Games did. Is my thing.
Or are you saying
We're talking
better than?
decade-defining.
Well, no, I feel like a lot of people did not like how.
The first one. We're talking.
Yeah, we're just talking
Hunger
the first
Games
one.
Part
I-
one.
Because the
So that
Yeah,
was
second,
the
the
first
last,
one was pretty fucking popping because
Yeah.
that I read it. I read the book as a kid, so
yeah, I feel like every film after the first one kind of not that good.
because like Twilight was mostly for girls, but Hunger Games like anyone could read it.
I was
That
definitely
was
one of the
2012.
people that was
Just
like,
coping.
it's just ripping off this other book. It's not as good.
Battle
so-
Royale.
Battle
yeah.
Royale.
Yeah.
Well, I
Um,
read Battle Royale after the Hunger Games, so, and then I realized, oh, Battle Royale was so much better.
But there you go. I mean, I feel like Hunger Games, the first Hunger Games, had a pretty huge impact on our generation culturally.
It's true. We had Minecraft Hunger Games as a result.
That is very true. That's so.
We got
fucking
freaking
true.
the whole battle royale video game genre because
from
of that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's the thing. You can argue that. I mean, whether or not you were a fan, I like I said when those Twilight movies were coming out, I was not a fan. I went and saw the last one in theaters because I was dating M by that time, and I thought it was a shit film. I still do. I actually think all the other ones are way better than that last film. Now that I've seen them all, but I will make the argument that Twilight was a decade-defining film. Hey, MILFs in the chat, just comment down below, back me up.
I don't know if it really defined it. Granted, I was jaded and going into high school freshman year, so
You have to
I would
separate
say-
that high school part from yourself.
no. But like I was reading it in 8th grade. But I feel like the decade defining aspect was just like, oh my god, are you Team Edward or Team Jacob? I don't feel like there was as much fanfare when the film first came out, but I was also just like not focused on it because I'm like other stuff.
But I mean, if that's the discourse that's happening at that time, I feel like that is a cultural. That's
No,
a
but
change.
that was
cultural
later. That
mindset.
was more like I think like Eclipse and Breaking Dawn.
I get
For
what
the-
you're
for the movies?
saying, and I'm thinking of like other films that like had cringe fan bases, and I just keep thinking
You know
back
what?
to Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland and how that had like a cultural impact on like our high school.
Let's stop talking.
What are you
And-
talking about?
I know, but like that's not a decade-defining film. That is just one of those fads that happened. Like that, if you're gonna compare like things that were just like people arguing about little things like that, I feel like
Okay, I'll withdraw. I will agree with you guys that Twilight was pretty influential. Because, you know, people still make Twilight jokes to this day. Like, I still hear like, oh, a better love story than Twilight. So
they're all right films. They're not that bad.
I feel like Twilight
it's
brought it
just
more
fun
now
to make
just-
fun of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel
Especially
like-
because they were acted like very cringy. So
there
it's
are
easy
some
to
really
dogpile them.
like it's really hard to take it seriously. Like there's some good scenes in there, and you're like, all right, I'm getting into this, and then they're just like, yeah, these
And then there's
vampires
the
are
spider monkey scene.
playing fucking baseball for 20 minutes to I forget that band's name.
Incubus.
Not Incubus.
Yoel's favorite band.
Hell yeah.
Oh, Muse.
Muse. Yeah, they
Oh,
played
Jesus.
baseball for an entire Muse song. And it's
Fuck.
like
What the fuck? Wait,
Yeah.
which Muse song? I kind of like Muse.
I don't
Is Muse
remember
still
which
around?
one. No, I don't think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, they're alive.
I've never heard a Muse song other than that like first 2 albums that they put out or whatever.
What?
Everything that they put
They're-
out in high school, that's all I hear. Anyways, this
Watchmen-
podcast's not about Twilight. I
Sec-
don't know why
the
we're still
second
talking
Watchmen.
about
Yeah,
it.
we got.
I feel like this is why it's a decade-defining film. We're still fucking talking about it.
Oh my god, we fell for it. Fuck.
Fuck.
Okay, do you get? We started right. We're just kind of discussing our thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're
okay, we
into
already
it.
started the
Like an
fucking
actual-
podcast.
actual
Yeah.
lit.
I don't
Alright,
know.
guys,
This is
now
so
we start
informal.
recording. This is how all of our podcasts are.
I feel like we're discussing
harmonizing.
things.
Okay.
Yeah, but
all
we're
right.
like going to be actually reviewing a list of movies. And
No,
we
Yeah,
literally,
so
it was
that's
just
Twilight.
a.
This is
what I-
Look at the fucking Discord.
This is what I
yeah, but
wrote
we started
down.
part 2 like forever ago.
Okay,
This is what I wrote down.
Let's start
'cause-
narrowing it down then. Now
See,
that we've
look.
discussed.
This is what I wrote
You know,
down
Jeff,
for the
would have been nice to look
2010s.
at a list like
No,
on
but
a
there's
docket that we
nothing
could
on
have our
this list.
eyeballs on.
There's nothing
Yeah.
to look on this list. It's like, do we want to have a 15-minute conversation about the Expendables? Because some fucking film bro decided to put that on his list of decade-defining films. Who the fuck? No.
Yeah,
Like,
that's why we look
I
at.
didn't-
That's why you say Expendables, and we're all like, "No, that's trash. Skip it."
So you want to go through this list
You
of
guys wanna
random
do it like
films
that?
that I want?
I thought that's what we were going to do.
No.
No.
Talking about Twilight.
What are you talking about?
Just keep going.
Oh my God. That's scary. But then, in that case, then what would be the defining films of this year, of this decade?
Oh, we
not
didn't
year?
even do the 2000s. We kind of just glossed over that.
Do you want to
We
do
were
the
just
gonna
Talking
do
about
2000s?
this-
Twilight. What do you mean?
We were
Twilight
just
was
gonna
like
do
the
2010s.
end
The
of.
2010s. I'm the 2000s.
Oh, the first Twilight was like 2008. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
But we're not.
What the
Are we
fuck? Why are we talking about it in the 2010s then?
Because we have
God
babies
damn
in
it.
here.
Because we were
We were
talking
talking
about
about
Eclipse,
Eclipse
which is
and
part
Breaking
3
Dawn.
that came out in
Oh my
2010.
god. Okay, no,
Okay.
then it's not Twilight, it's Hunger Games.
I'll take it. If we're talking about 2010s, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yes.
Twilight was a 2000s film.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the defining of the 2000s.
No, but I think that Hunger Games is definitely
Hunger
defining
Games
of
is
2010s.
defining of.
I kind of like it's at the very tail end of the 2000s, but it's still there.
Yeah.
We have to
We're not
count it.
rounding up. We're not rounding up.
But it's
Then that's
it's-
you're
it's-
starting to get into the argument of whether or not I'm a '90s kid because I was born in '95 and I
Okay,
technically grew up
alright.
in the early
It's a
2000s.
very gray area.
Like, see,
We're
that's
talking
the thing.
about the 90s. Why are you bringing this up? We're trying
That's
to talk
like
about
that's the
2000s
thing.
and
That's the thing that
2010s.
people do. It's like, well, you were born in the tail end of the '90s. You're not technically a '90s
like,
kid. I was like,
technically, I'm
born
a
in
90s
'95, fucker. Shut up. So
That's
if-
supposed
the
to
tail end is 95.
it is within that 10-year span. Therefore,
Well, then-
it is part of that
Yeah.
era.
No, that's
Twilight.
That's what I said. It got the tail
So-
end of the 2000s. But I'm also only saying that because the 2000s was so heavily dominated by fucking legendary classics like
Shrek.
the Lord of the Rings trilogy,
Shrek.
Shrek.
Dark Knight, Shrek,
Shrek.
Spider-Man, Dark Knight.
Shut
Shrek.
up, Jeff.
Spider-Man, the fucking
Spider-Man.
Tobey
Spy
Maguire
Kids.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You say Spy,
Spy
Kids?
Kids.
Pixar.
We didn't
Pixar
talk about
films.
Spy Kids.
There's a couple Pixar films.
You got like The Incredibles, Finding Nemo.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was
yeah,
that was
Story.
Nemo.
that was fledgling Pixar. Like that was when they were swinging for the fences back then because they just
Yeah, because that was that was kind of after Toy Story had popped off.
wasn't
they
Toy
were like
Story-
hitting their stride.
Wasn't Toy Story,
Story was
in like
99.
99? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Was that
yeah.
a decade-defining film of the 90s? Would you,
You
say?
know,
I would say so.
I would
Because
say so,
it's
too.
99. There you go.
I don't know. I feel like
It-
Toy Story 2 is more.
More
But
decade-defining.
again, we're talking about.
Yeah, but that's the next
2000s.
decade.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
I
that's
didn't like
something
that.
that we can talk about is if the first film came out in one decade and then the next film came out in another decade, like that's I feel like
Yeah.
if it had a cultural impact, sure. Which two, I mean, definitely three. Whenever three came out,
Ooh, 20.
Are we gonna have a multi-decade, fucking?
maybe because three. Oh my God, people still talk about three. That ending.
I didn't even.
Oh shit! When did 3 come out?
Yeah,
2000.
when did three come out?
2010. It came out on the year 2010. Holy shit.
was a
That's
sophomore.
fucking like 3 movies in 3 decades.
Wow, that's
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, pretty much. It is.
Multi-decade crossing defining film.
Yeah, that's pretty.
The defining films of a generation.
Yeah, 30 years.
That's
That's
fucking
insane.
true.
Wild.
Don't say 30 years, please.
Why, Dominic?
Shut up.
30 years ago.
That being said,
Yes.
Toy Story 4 is not making
No,
You don't
the list.
acknowledge
They fucked
Toy
up.
Story
They
4.
fucked that
I
shit
haven't
up.
even
Sucked.
seen it.
I
Or sucked.
refuse to watch it. There we go. The 2000s defined by Pixar, early superhero films, Star Wars to some extent,
Shrek.
Shrek.
Nah.
Definitely.
Well, actually, yeah, I guess Spider-Man and Batman were pretty
Oh.
decade defining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Iron
so,
Man
without a doubt. Yeah,
Iron Man
Iron
2.
Man.
Maguire.
Yeah,
And then you had the garbage fire that was 3.
I would
And
say
then,
I liked 3.
I mean,
fun.
even the X-Men
Oh.
films came out during that. The
Well,
first few.
X-Men is definitely the gateway for MCU. So yeah, that
Yeah.
counts.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, hold on. Back to what you just said.
What?
Out of 1 and 2 and 3, you liked 3 the most?
No. I did not say that. I said I liked 3. I enjoyed it. I did not like it the most. 1 is
Okay.
still has a special place in my.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. Yeah, X-Men was definitely the gate. X-Men and I guess Blade were like
Yeah.
X-Men, Spider-Man, and Blade walked so like MCU could run.
Hold on, we're gonna say Blade is a decade-defining film.
I would not. I feel like people. I haven't watched Blade.
No.
I feel like
It's
other
not.
people
I would
would
say not.
argue that.
I would say
It's
no.
not.
I would say
You
more
would
so
not know? You've never seen
X-Men,
it?
X-Men and Spider-Man.
I honestly, I would say Blade is no. X-Men is in that gray area probably for me of being a decade-defining film. Even though I love those films,
It's a cult classic.
but if you were going to say Tobey
But think
Maguire's
about-
Spider-Man, that is the decade-defining.
That's true.
superhero
Yeah.
film,
That,
the
yeah.
but think
quintessential.
but of course you think of X-Men and you think of
Hugh Jackman,
as Wolverine,
Yeah,
which is literally a decade career of.
I mean
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, I think of all those original actors. The guy who played Cyclops, the chick who played.
Yeah.
I mean, Storm, Rogue,
Yeah.
even the dude who
yeah.
played Nightcrawler in X2. They were all pretty like
Or fucking Patrick Stewart
iconic,
as
memorable
Professor
roles.
Sex.
Exactly. Ian McKellen as Magneto, or that
Yeah.
frog guy as the frog guy.
Toad?
Oh, fuck.
No.
Yeah, Toad.
Yeah,
whatever his
Toad.
name is.
I hated Toad.
Mystique,
Oof.
Sabretooth. You
I
know what
agree
we
with
haven't
that.
talked about in decade-defining films? The DCU.
That's because it's not decade defining.
That's not true. It's decade defining of this is
Being
not how you
shit.
make DC films.
No. No, I
Marvel
just
fanboys.
it just got super outshadowed. I don't think it made much of an impact.
I would agree with that. I think like it was so bad that it just fell to obscurity.
Like, okay, if the MCU did not exist, I could make an argument that the DCU made an impact. But because the MCU's there, it's like the fucking older brother that's better at everything and the little brother that's forgotten.
Stuck in the
Yeah.
shadow.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild how when talking about the 2000s, we have all these different movies, all these different takes, but then talking about the
Yeah.
2010s, it's just MCU.
Or Star
then
Wars.
the
It
Hunger
becomes
Games.
very, very
It's like-
franchised.
It's like fucking
quickly.
every year. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's crazy
It's
when
kind
you
of
say
interesting. Well, let's segue to the
I feel like that segues to part 3.
last 4 years, where the MCU has definitely not been good.
It went too hard in the paint.
I
Watch the podcast for that.
I would not say that any of the films, the MCU films that came out in the last 4 years, are decade defining.
Considering they're drowned out by like other sequel or original movies, I would also agree.
But then like that's the thing though. I feel like 2024 has been like the dark horse here. You've got like Barbie, you've got Oppenheimer.
That's
if you really
2023.
want-
Last year.
23.
2023.
Yeah, we're talking about 2020 now, right? We're part 3.
You just said 2024.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
Oh
said
my
so.
bad. Sorry. Yeah, you know what I meant. But we've
There's-
got like
yeah,
Barbie.
Barbie,
We've got
Oppenheimer. I feel like Talk to
Top
Me
Gun.
as well.
Talk to Me.
Top-
Yeah, that's a really
No.
good example. What,
You wouldn't say Talk to Me is a decade defining?
I don't think so.
Here's
Alright.
what I
It's a
wrote
very-
down for my decade defining films of the 2020s.
Okay.
It is Dune Part 1 and 2.
I agree.
Mostly 2 though, I feel like is more
Mostly.
Oh
two.
yeah.
yeah, which is
Yeah. If we're
Very
going by the
interesting.
consensus of
Like the
people,
first
then,
one was popular, but it was nothing on the level of
Of
two.
two.
Like two's been memed
which
to
is
hell.
which is wild because earlier when we were talking about twos and how the ones were the more influential ones than the twos, like
It's
this one,
shifted.
I would agree that two is the one that is the decade defining film above one. I do have Oppenheimer there, Top Gun Maverick, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Barbie,
Yeah.
Barbie.
and I also have Godzilla minus one on there, Avatar 2.
Mm.
Even though you could argue that Avatar 2, maybe not so much. But I know, like, with that Instagram post that we said that was one of the films on there.
Yeah.
You
I-
know, I would say Batman.
I was
Batman was
ask,
pretty
Rob
influential.
Batman?
Pattinson,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, like, we had
Robert
COVID.
Pattinson?
COVID at
You s-
What other 2020 Batman are we going to talk about?
No, I personally just don't think of it as decade defining, but you can hear him.
Well, so far, because we don't, we're only in 2024.
not to mention we had COVID that fucked up a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
these films were supposed to have already come out before 2020s.
So
Yeah.
like that when I was looking at the list, there weren't a lot of films that came out. Like this whole list is from 2023, 2024. Everything out
Yeah.
the 2020, 2021, 2022, like there's not really anything that I would say was decade defining. I mean, I'm kind of curious to see if someone wants to bring up the box office lists of the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Say-
there's no film from 2020 for top. Well, I mean, yeah.
Hey, you got
Like the
You
highest
got-
grossing film of 2020 was Bad Boys for Life.
I was about to say you got Bad Boys for Life, Sonic the
Oh,
Hedgehog, and The
okay.
Invisible Man. Oof.
Yeah,
Onward, The Croods, New Age, Wonder Woman 1984, Tenet. is
Ooh.
on that list.
Oh, Tenet, that was a bad movie.
Jesus Christ,
Not
this is
good
a
for
rough year. Oof, imagine doing an award show for this year.
Yeah, it was kind of like a dead. I feel like it was a dead year or a couple of years during
Yeah.
that point, but
Yeah.
a big lull in Hollywood movies.
For sure.
Oh, are we done with 2020s?
I mean, we're still talking.
I
Why?
guess.
Because I want to segue to predictions for upcoming
Oh, you're ready.
upcoming films of the rest of 2020s.
Oh, you're ready. to
Which
go.
I will say right away because I just looked it up. Avatar. We're
God.
getting 3 and 4 within this
Damn,
decade.
no.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so Avatar
That's cool.
3 is supposed to come out in 2025, and Avatar 4 is 2029.
Wasn't Avatar 3, that was the one where James Cameron said he turned in the script and they gave him no.
That was like 3 and 4, I
yeah,
think.
they were like, yeah, just
It
do
was
this.
like 2 of them. They were like, yeah, they were speechless. They had no notes for him.
I hate to speculate, but I really think if we're going off of how 2 ended, that could be a pretty big thing. Like, I feel like that'll become a huge spectacle. and
Although
maybe,
that-
like, our next big
I will-
sci-fi.
I mean, the 2 fucking Avatar 2 almost broke the record again.
I
so.
will make the
That's true.
argument for 2.
Mhm.
I was really hyped for 2 because of James Cameron's second films are always really awesome.
Remember you saying that?
But the second one just kind of felt like a rehash of 1 in a way because they're like going to a new village, they're learning the culture all over again, and then they battle the guys at the end. The thing I'm worried about with 3 is if they do that again. Hey, we're gonna go find the volcano people, we're gonna learn their culture, and then we battle the white people at
I don't
the
think
end.
I don't think it's gonna happen.
I hope not,
I really don't think
because
that's
that would
I-
really blow the steam off in
Can
that film
can
franchise.
I say something? This is completely unrelated. I think that video game adaptations is kind of decade defining for the 2020s because now we're starting to get a kickoff into like films that are actually getting
For
a title.
shows, for the most part.
For movies, we've had a couple good ones.
That's true. We've had like Sonic and whatever the fuck. Super Mario Bros.
Super Mario Bros. Yeah, there's a lot of polish on that. I don't know if they've been like to the point of like Dune or anything like that, where like it's been a huge cultural phenomenon or like something that's been memed to death by the general societal population. But at the
Not as big, but like in general, like pretty popular
yeah,
because they're also bringing in fans from video games. So it's like
yeah.
a cross-platform
I'm gonna
popularity
s-
thing now.
I'm gonna say
Five Nights at Freddy's. Sorry,
What
we're gonna
about
say
it?
I was gonna say, like, I feel like this is the beginning of that. Like, remember
Era.
when early 2000s, we were starting to get some superhero films popping off after a long time of them just failing fucking one after the other. I feel like we're in that first decade of video game films where it's going to start popping off, and then the next decade is where it's going to be, whoa, this
I'd
is
play it out.
crazy.
Don't feel like that's the case, only because video game adaptations are very much thriving.
They're also
streaming-wise, not so much movies.
Yeah, they're also not like connected
Yeah.
like the MCU is, because MCU is like, this is our formula. We're gonna do the same shit every time.
No, but I mean,
Whereas
like,
video
I mean,
games-
like, it was very disjointed in the early 2000s of like
Yeah.
the superhero films. Everybody,
Yeah, like
every studio had
Spider-Man.
its own thing.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of feeling like it wasn't as popular back then, but now we're starting to gain traction. And I mean, like, TV shows, it's on its own side thing because the TV shows are popping off right now, but we still haven't really gotten the movies quite right. Like, yeah, we've had Five Nights, we've had Super Mario, and then we had that, what was the other?
Like,
Like, it
Mortal
was a good
Kombat
movie.
was fine. Detective Pikachu,
Yeah, as I feel like we're getting in the right direction, whereas maybe in the next couple of years, or maybe in the I don't want to say that,
2030s.
2030s.
I do see where you're coming from. But I feel like
Yeah.
as it is, or adapting video games as movies is going to be difficult just because there's never enough time, and that's why
Yeah,
it's more successful streaming because they have like at least like 6 to 8 episodes to actually tell like more of the story.
I
but
think-
I would like for there to be more successful. Like Five Nights at Freddy's was successful because it appealed to like mainly the fans, but like mainstream wise, like
Yeah.
not that successful.
I
so.
think
What?
that's a big reason the Assassin's Creed game failed.
Detective Pikachu and Mario were more successful because it appealed like to everyone, like adults and children more.
But I think what we're missing here is also the demographic. Like right now, at our current age, mid 20s to 30s, not calling anybody out, but but in our demographic now, like we don't have the nostalgia factor. I think like what Jeff said is really on brand. We're starting to steer the ship into the right direction. I think Five Nights was the last one to really do it, and I think once you get into the 30s, the 2030s, which does sound weird to say, I think those will be movies that will hinge on like our generation of playing games. And like at that point, you don't really need to have a whole 6 episode thing to build out an entire story to catch up a generation. They already know the story. And so like they're just going to tell you what you already know, or they're going to build off of it and give you something new. I think that's where we'll start seeing the decade defining films of our next decade. So I think it's really possible, to be honest. I do think like if we were to choose a de facto film to say that was decade defining for this genre to start, it would be Five Nights, because it did have that. Like you saw Alex, who went from I don't know shit about this movie to oh, I want to actually know more about this film. So it can sell that way too.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who were like totally against the franchise, thought it was cringe and all this shit, and then now all of a sudden they're fans of it.
Yeah. Right. Wait a minute though,
Yeah.
we didn't talk about one decade defining franchise.
Uh-oh.
Fast and Furious.
That's not
Ooh.
decade.
It's multi-decade though.
Multi-decade.
No,
Toy Story
No.
and Fast and Furious on the same level.
we are not having this on.
Literally started in 2001. We got parts 11 and 12 waiting in
No.
2020 something.
Yeah.
Those movies
Yeah.
don't exist.
I mean, Tokyo
They're-
Drift. Tokyo Drift. I would argue that Tokyo Drift, at the very least.
No,
At Tokyo
Is
Drift,
a-
we got Fast 5, now Fast 10.
no.
I don't know about all those
Point.
other ones, but Tokyo Drift and 1 definitely were at the
No.
very least Tokyo Drift. I'm gonna argue for Tokyo Drift.
I would argue for
Drift.
5 because it's the best one.
I would agree with that too, Dom. I think 5 definitely that.
Is that the one where
that's
they're
when
in
they took
Brazil?
the turn. Yes,
No,
it is.
shut
Yes, it
up.
is.
That is
It's the
that is
return
really-
to
Fuck up.
form, but also paving the new way.
It did.
Where's Alex?
He can't hear you
Alex,
now.
come.
He can save you.
Hey, Alex likes Tokyo Drift. He said that was the best one.
That's a
He-
one
he's
movie.
also a
Okay,
fan.
we're not doing a fucking decade defining poo poo pee pee talk about fucking fast and poo poo. Okay, it's not happening.
You know, Anakin,
Not
maybe
on my
just
fucking
watching
watch.
them like 1 through 10, you'll appreciate them and realize.
I
that they-
would rather eat lead.
I mean, if you're eating Lunchables, hey.
Damn, I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah, where do we go?
I think
Look, this is what happens when you bring up Fast and Furious.
I mean, they already went to space, so where do we go from
Uh,
here? As
time travel.
Hell, they can
Exactly.
open a portal to hell, and I would
I'll
be
die.
good at that. Yeah,
I guess if you were
I
to
think
say
that's it.
2020
I think we covered everything
I think we did. I was about to say, I think like if we were to wrap it up, I think 2020s is kind of like the return to form for just original ideas,
for life,
kind of coming back.
for cinema.
Yeah,
'Cause
Here's
MCU
hoping.
is dead.
Here's hoping.
here's hoping.
Deadpool's gonna fix the MCU.
Although,
Get rid of the MCU.
although I'm gonna say there's been some wacky announcements recently that makes me think that Hollywood has not learned a single thing. Like
They
the
have.
Rihanna Smurfs movie, the new Frankenstein film
Yeah, that's true.
with Jared Leto,
What?
Frankenstein.
It's not Jared Leto.
I know
it's
it just
The Rick
looks
and
like
Morty
James
One
Franco.
Punch Man
Wait, no.
movie.
But, like,
what was
could
the
you
other
argue-
one? What was the? We were talking about this the other
The
night.
Rick and Morty One Punch Man movie.
Ice Spice
true.
and Denzel.
Ice Spice is being casted in an
It's in a. tell him.
it's an Akira Kurosawa remake of the movie
Directed
High
by
and
Spike
Low,
Lee.
directed by Spike Lee, starring Denzel Washington and Ice
Ice.
Spice.
But she's so boring and mid. Why would they?
I don't know.
I know you know who is gonna watch it, Alejandro, and he can't defend himself. He would go watch it because he loves Ice Spice, because he has no taste.
And I feel like there was another announcement that they made recently that was like,
That was
what the hell?
butt naked SpongeBob.
What?
What?
That was in the group chat. It was about butt naked SpongeBob. There will be nudity in the SpongeBob movie coming out soon.
I didn't see that.
Oh. How do we close this out?
Well, everybody, we had a fairly crazy, all over the place discussion about decade-defining films from the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s.
Possibly
So,
the 2030s.
We'll so we're gonna leave it there. We're not gonna talk anymore, hopefully. And you comment down below. What are some decade-defining films you think of?
Don't
what do
list
you
your
think?
favorite fucking movies.
Yeah, what do you think a decade-defining film is? And like and subscribe, hit the bell notification so you get notified when we do more podcasts, because we try to do one the last Saturday of every month. Share this with your friends. All that junk.
Catch us next time when we finally talk about Dune Part 2.
Yeah,
Or
It's like in fucking
When I
3
talk about my
months.
most controversial film takes.
or
Sure.
talking
That's
about
every
Fast and
time we film.
Furious
Furious
11 and
13.
12.
Okay, not. I won't be there for that. Don't invite me.
Don't call
Talk
me.
about it.
Don't come
Yeah,
to my
don't-
house.
Yes, exactly, Rowley. Yes.
Stop crying. It won't do any good.
No. Fuck you.
Oh, speaking of sound bites, we're gonna send you guys off with this sound bite, okay?
You better back your shit up, homeboy. I will catch you, your dumb ass.